Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome, Michael and Ben. We're back with the From the Weeds to the Clouds podcast. I believe it's episode number 6 here as we head into early mid-November. I hope you guys had a good Halloween, and Thanksgiving will be here before we know it. I know we had our first snow over the weekend here in Detroit area. Michael Peterson, my co-host here. Thank you for joining as always. And we've got Ben Messerly from who's here and going to be able to share some incredible data and insights with the power of what headset provides. So I'm going to break down some numbers, what's actually happening right now from a data standpoint, and probably add some commentary as we do. So Michael Peterson, Ben, how are you guys?
I'm doing real good. It's a pleasure to be here. And like you said, the snow, I'm not ready for it at all, but I guess that means that we're in for the long haul. So getting comfortable, getting ready for what's coming next.
Winter's coming, that's for damn sure. I appreciate you guys taking the time to hop on today. I know we're definitely in the fall mood here in my neck of the woods here on the West Coast. I'm here out in Vancouver, Washington, and there's a leaf blower just blowing right outside my window. So I apologize if there's any reverb on the background noise or anything like that. But
You sound
fall's
good.
coming and winter's coming even faster, and that data's definitely been telling a lot of stories. Really is kind of dependent on where you are throughout the country on whether or not you're really looking forward to what's coming forward in 2026, or if you're kind of clenching your teeth and hoping for the best. So kind of really depends on who you are and where you are in the country. But there's definitely a lot to uncover within the data. I know a lot of different operators are really excited for what's coming around in 2026. I think it's going to be a year of a lot of competition and a lot of growth. I think with the way that the messages that this administration has been conveying have been mixed, to say the least, but I really do think we are going to see some real legislative change coming in the next year, if not in the next 2 years. So I'm definitely looking forward to what's on the horizon, that's for sure.
Man, I like what you're saying. I don't know what your intel and insight is there, but I'm all about it. With that, Ben, I think you had prepared some data for us to dive into, and I know you've got access, real time as well if we have any additional questions, but I'm not sure if you'd be able to share that. There we go. Love it.
You
Ooh, that's
Love
know
it.
it.
good.
You know I got it on hand. Every market tells its own unique story, and it's shaped by factors, things like maturity, pricing, geography, especially, and regulatory environments surrounding it. But we're seeing this play out very differently across all the states that we have a read in within Headset. So, for an example, if we're looking at sales growth and we can see things like New York here on the far left-hand side, sales have gone up by over 118% over the last year in comparison to where we were at this time in 2024. Ohio is seeing crazy growth at over 67%. And then on the flip side, you've got Arizona and California who are down by over 10% on each side, and Nevada down only by about 9.4% as well in total sales. We can see this thing shift from those mature markets on the west side of the country are definitely starting to see that competition start to set in from oversupply or from market contraction, and it's just really starting to have and take a toll on these sales numbers in general across these different territories. But really what's driving these divergent results is honestly pricing, and cheaper prices tend to incent buying more units on average. So in states where pricing is more favorable and the market is less saturated, we're seeing outsized growth. And then in more mature, higher price markets, the growth is kind of stalled or even declined. So in short, if you're looking for momentum, the Midwest and the Northeast are definitely where the action is right now. They're less mature, more price sensitive, and showing more upside.
So just to ground us here, that light purple on the left is the 2025 year to date, and the blue is 2024, same time frame. And then for the
Correct.
unit one, the yellow is this year, and the orange is last year. Great, great. Yeah, I think that it's incredible. We talk about prices and price compression and how that drives a lot more units and grows. And I'm sure we'll hopefully get into it a little bit, but is New York maybe an exception to that? I think prices are probably still going down, but still pretty high. I don't know. What we'll see what the data says. But Michael, any thoughts on that? The macro from a market standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go back for a second, Ben,
Yeah.
the thing that just blew my mind being in Michigan, seeing how it, according to this graph, it says that Michigan sales have gone down from 24 to 25. And then if you
Look at
look at
those
the
units.
other, and then if you, yes, and then if you look at the units have gone way up. So it's exactly what you're saying as far as the price is everything.
Yeah, it's shocking to me how much weed Michigan can sell with a
Yes.
fraction of the population than what it has in comparison to California, because it is way outpacing California in terms of total units sold. It's unreal the volume that Michigan has been able to pull out in terms of they're selling more weed than ever before and still not making as much as when they did during COVID. Like, it's unreal. It's just crazy to see that they're actually able to sell more weed and still make less money even though they're selling more product.
What happens with long-term equilibrium on that? What do you guys think? I mean, do we see, okay, now we've maxed out on the amount of quantity that we can sell and our revenues are going down, or is it just going to be a continued race to the bottom because people either don't have access to data or choose not to look at it and are still fighting for market share all in their heads, or fighting for market share that may not be the most profitable?
It's a culmination of all of it, truly. I mean, ultimately, what I'm seeing in Michigan really is not taking place. Like, what's happening in Michigan is just really kind of an isolated incident. It's not really going on anywhere across the country at the scale that it is going on there. So it's kind of hard to tell whether it's more of a strategy thing or just a complete race to the bottom. But with Michigan, I mean, it really benefited from being one of the legal rec markets where it was completely dry across all of the bordering states surrounding it. So
Yep.
everybody went in there to buy weed. And you guys know it best, being Michigan natives. You guys have been there at the dispensary, seeing it firsthand and buying it firsthand. You know this, but it is just unbelievable to see, kind of how Michigan has kind of formed itself into the market that it is today.
Well,
It's gonna Go ahead, Michael.
now there's these outside factors though that unfortunately like we aren't going to be able to really see how the market naturally progresses on its own because of some of those outside forces like you were saying with policies on the national level but also on the state level where Michigan has proposed a large sales tax increase and the population is generally concerned that that is going to cause much less sales as a result, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I also think it's worth noting, like, Michigan is still a huge market. Even, we'll see what happens with, the Ohio coming online, but even the border town down here is towards Illinois, but in the corner just over Indiana, I don't know if that'll ever have legal sales. And then there's a bunch of sales up in the UP to Wisconsin people as well. So it's a big market, around what, 3 billion or so annually. And it looks like it's kind of peaking or maxing out. And now it's just going to be interesting to see how big some of these other markets become as they mature, be it in Ohio or Wisconsin when it comes online. Eventually, with the Pennsylvania, if it goes rec at some point, that impact, and as the southern states maybe ever start to have sales available, the impact of traveling consumers. But the incredible thing here is just New York and how fast it has shot up to
Yes.
be. I think this is year over year, but if I remember correctly, I was looking at some monthly sales data, and New York is now number 3.
If it's not already, it will be soon, right? It's just what we know it's coming eventually.
Exactly.
Yeah, the question is it going to overtake California? And that'll be interesting to see. That's going to be maybe a little ways out, but at their growth rate, if they sustain this growth rate, which I'm sure isn't likely, but I think that there's still a lot of growth to be had out of that New York market, which is already showing itself as a viable player here as far as market size.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, is how can New York possibly continue to sustain this growth? Because we have seen a massive jump in revenue. They've nearly doubled in comparison to where they were at this point last year. And the data shows that, much like a lot of the now emerging markets across the country and some of Canada as well, that prices are coming down, and that's just no shock. And then when some of those, I guess, maybe more stagnant or maybe more mature markets, maybe we'll see the inverse, where actually prices are actually going up year over year because they need to solidify themselves to minimize themselves to more, worse margins, whatever it may be at this point. But really, ultimately, we are seeing a lot of these prices come down pretty drastically from these emerging markets, including New York, New Jersey, Ohio, especially coming down quite a bit in their average item price, Connecticut, Illinois, and then we can see the inverse occur with Missouri and Colorado being those more mature markets here on the Midwest and West Coast.
Yeah, California stabilized a little bit, it looks like, as well. Still down.
But really, I guess in the newest markets, when prices come out, they're at their highest essentially then, and
Yeah.
they're always the fastest to drop. That's been constant, as happened with every single market. The one major outlier though is Michigan. They are actually continuing to drop their prices faster than any other market in the country, which is just staggering to me. It has the lowest average item price, I think, cruising at $8 is something just unreal, and it's gone down from $10 where it was last year to now less than 8 at this point now. So razor thin margins there in the Midwest.
Yeah, and then and how much of that is internal within Michigan versus Michigan wanting to make sure they get that Indiana consumer instead of them going over to Illinois, the Ohio consumer to still come to shop in Michigan because Ohio's the up there along the top 3 highest price. In Michigan, they're buying, they're getting 3 or 4 times more product for the same price. And the other thing I think is New York is going to have it has this tremendous growth trajectory, but I think that there's still probably similar to California, a large portion of consumers who are not purchasing yet in the regulated market. And with some price compression in the regulated market, does that allow for New York to, instead of doubling in market size, to quintuple in market size, something like that? Just some thoughts putting out there for us.
The thing is with New York, it's in a unique position because they actually have been the restrictions around discounting in that state are actually very,
Yeah.
very regulated, and it's just not something that is commonly practiced throughout throughout, I guess, the industry in that region. So that could actually be contributing a lot to the reason why we're actually seeing a bigger drop in average item price, because they're not using discounts to their advantage. While, Michigan, obviously, if there isn't a discount going on for a certain product, what's going on with it? It seems to kind of be the case for a lot of Michigan operators. While in New York, it's actually the opposite, where they're actually just cutting down on the out the door price as opposed to the actual discount itself. So kind of a lot to there.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. And the other thing that's interesting about the New York market, having had some experience operating there, is many of the retailers just they do your standard X markup off of wholesale, and there hasn't seemed to be a ton of the price wars yet. And is that because there's enough for everybody to eat and they're comfortable and happy with their sales? But you mentioned the laws and regulations around the discounting, and that's real also. So that's a preventative measure from dropping an advertising price, but there's no law, I don't believe, that says that you can't price it at whatever you want. And that's where many retailers just do their standard X markup and achieve a 50% margin versus what they paid at wholesale.
It's just interesting to me to think about. I had no clue how New York dealt with their sales, right? And there's so many of these different details with all these different markets, right? Like, I don't know exactly why Missouri has had that price increase, but I'm sure someone that's very familiar with that market would have some more insights than maybe some of us. But it's just different worlds in some of these different places, like you're talking about with Michigan versus New York, as we're seeing on the two sides of the chart.
My apologies. I know the leaf blower is going to be right back in my ear again here, but I'll try to do what I can to minimize my chatterbox. But I really like this graph too, because it can also paint the picture on where consumer trends are shifting towards, because obviously prices are going down pretty consistently across the entire market, but we can actually see consumers shift to actually purchasing more cost-friendly items. meaning pre-rolls are the major shift of what we're really seeing here, especially among Gen Z. Users are now continuing to get into, become of legal age and are now starting to purchase these products. We are now finding that pre-rolls are by far one of the largest growing categories in the country, as well as vapor pens. Within vapor pens, we're definitely seeing a huge movement towards disposables being the leading segment amongst the vapor pen hardware. And then for infused pre-rolls, that is the largest grossing segment right now in the pre-roll category right now, because it caters to both not only the bargain shopper, but also the connoisseur top shelf smoker as well, because they can go about it both ways. It really caters to both customers very well. So there's no shock on why we're seeing so much more of a churn against those products.
Yeah, if
So
you
I think
look at that, sorry, Michael, I was just going to say, if you look at that, I think it's fascinating how you see flower plus pre-roll. And if you were to do that, 41.3 plus 13.6 from January is what, 44.9%? In flour items, and then now flour and pre-roll at what's that, 45.8. So the together flour has gone up, and the convenience factor of the pre-roll and or the infused aspect of it has bumped up that overall flour consumption. And are infused pre-rolls maybe taking away from the concentrates? Because one would think, or is it just newer consumers that are coming into the market who aren't as familiar or comfortable with concentrates? I don't know. What do you think about?
I guess the thing is with pre-rolls is like they're no longer that it's nice to have. Like it is a truly leading category now amongst a lot of different operators, and it's by far the infused segment specifically is amongst one of the fastest growing segments in cannabis. And the major things that are driving it are convenience and value. Customers like smoking good weed, and customers like smoking cheap weed. That is for sure. And within pre-rolls, the connoisseur infused segment, it's accelerating faster than any other traditional flower only pre-roll. And for this concept of everyone loves joints for ease, ritual, portability, whatever it may be. And when you pair that with a higher potency and a strong value perception, where price meets potency, you've got a segment that's positioned for sustained growth going forward. So I don't think it'll be a shock to continue to see growth among pre-rolls just continue to go upwards. And then with vape specifically, moving a little bit slower, but it's steady.
We're going up.
And when you're looking at vapes, especially with younger consumers, the key consumer dynamic is the younger cohort, specifically with Gen Z, because they're driving vape use. And I think there was an analysis that found Gen Z and millennials together account for nearly like 60 to 70% of all cannabis sales within North America, which is just shocking to me. So definitely the younger generation is making big waves in that consumer trends. And then the one that's actually missing from this list is beverages. They only account for 1.5% of total market share, but cannabis beverages are growing very slowly and remain a small sliver of the total market. We hear a lot about Delta 9 hemp beverages and how they're really starting to take over the industry. To a certain regard, that's true, but at the end of the day, beverages make up a very, very, very small percentage of what this industry actually comes out to be. So, I mean, there is the area of opportunity in beverages that, it's there, that there's no denying that. But ultimately, it is definitely being far outpaced by those other juggernauts that are growing at a much, much more rapid rate.
my point that I kind of wanted to make before about the pre-rolls is I saw some study by Headset where more than price or brand, the number one thing that consumers cared about was potency and getting that higher percentage. And with infused products like that, that to me makes sense why you might see less people dabbing or using those concentrates, just because they get that same itch from the pre-roll now. It's being filled that same way where they get that really high percent.
Also the convenience factor, with vapor pens being up 1% and pre-rolls continuing to grow, maybe it's the vapes that's taken from the concentrates, as there are
Yes.
not just as much distillate, but you've got the cured resin, the live resin, even the rosin now available in that vapor pen form. And is what we see in flower with it coming down slightly, but pre-roll going up. Are we seeing something similar there in the concentrates carry potentially?
Well, and just speaking to the retailer side, retailers make the most money off flower. That's the easiest thing to make the money off of, right? So this also shows the struggle of being a retailer is the things that you're selling are less profitable.
For those states that have, I wanted to put a spotlight on some growing and emerging markets that I just found some of the data to be pretty interesting. So these are some of the states right now that are seeing either the most growth year over year or steady growth year over year. Obviously, in the top left-hand corner, New York, going all the way back to January from last year, has seen incredible growth. Obviously, starting out from basically zero, going now to being well over a $2-3 billion industry. We see New Jersey now starting to kind of stagnate in growth now. It's becoming a little bit more consistent. It's finding its homeostasis. Kind of same with Maryland, same with Maryland down in the bottom left-hand corner. Ohio with initial growth, probably towards the end of 2024, is now kind of starting to see more steady uptick in growth. And then with those more mature but still growing markets, we see Missouri still killing it as per usual. And then Massachusetts also seeing steady growth as well. You can definitely see, like I mean, I said at the beginning, the action truly is in the Northeast and the Midwest in terms of where the money actually is and where it's growing.
It's interesting how it just kind of becomes like this whole ecosystem, right? Where it's okay to travel and not feel, I mean, maybe not totally okay, but I can have cannabis in New York and then I can have cannabis in New Jersey and I don't have to be as worried about getting arrested, right? And just being able to be that culture, and it all just kind of flows together, I feel like, and it just makes these whole pockets more enjoyable, I guess. And I'm just thinking, I recently went down to Maryland and met with some friends, and they're like, yeah, we still go up to Michigan to buy, and they can do that, right? Like, maybe, whatever it is, but there are consumers that are able to be in different states, and it just really muddies the water and makes it harder to know sometimes, like, what's real in some ways, I guess.
And the last set of markets I wanted to highlight here with some contraction markets, Arizona and California are down both over 10% year over year, and Nevada also kind of down almost 10% as well with that. So we can see kind of the inverse kind of going on here. We're seeing definitely a lot of negative growth across these three here, but these are just and to be fair, almost all markets are experiencing some sort of negative growth. These are just the four markets that are having the highest negative growth overall, but mature Western markets generally have struggled the most. After the inflated demand during COVID, the industry began to compress while some other markets may have flattened out. And this is these markets are still actively trying to find homeostasis. I mean, Washington probably being the most consistent among the bunch that we see here. But a lot of this continued decline is continuing to decline in prices without seeing a balance with the increased demand. So that means failing to bring in new consumers or failing to upsell their current consumer base. So yeah, a lot to kind of absorb through that there, but ultimately it's going to be relatively common across most of the graphs that we'd see here for different states anyways.
Man, you're kind of being a bearer of bad news, aren't you? It's just down, down, down everywhere.
Hey, it's down, but it's just the thing is, especially with the winter too, like it really does, like summer's over. A lot of these shops are now going to stop placing orders with their vendors. Like I live here out in the Pacific Northwest, and Oregon does kind of a really funky thing where the last 2 weeks of the year, all stores stop ordering from their vendors, and their vendors know this. Like this is something that continues to happen every year, and they basically just shut down operation for the month of December. How are you making money during this? But people are now prepared well in advance for this. The operators are sophisticated. They know exactly what the demand patterns are looking like. They have studied the data. And that's why this data is so important to look at, because if you as an operator are just going based on your sixth sense, it's going to get you far, but it's going to leave you exposed to a lot of potential essentially to potential lost profits is really kind of what it gets down to at the end. But ultimately, using this data to help minimize your exposure is probably the single most important thing that I would preach to any cannabis operator in the space now that's not currently using any data.
You just kind of reminded me what's coming up here very soon is Green Wednesday. And
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
that's kind of an after effect of what you're talking about in December, right? Is there's all this competition. People are trying to get the customers. Prices are cheap. You get all your stuff, and then for the next couple weeks, people are just smoking on their supply through the rest of the
Exactly.
year. And it's tough. Dealing with those ups and downs as an operator is really, really challenging.
Yeah, it becomes that much more important to manage margins and profitability and figure out which dollars are worth chasing, what the big drivers of traffic and conversion are, and then having those strategic partnerships, whether you're a brand or a retailer, but figuring out ways to meet the consumer where they are, and be that with branding and marketing or through pricing and promotions. And at the end of the day, inventory, and as much inventory as possible, but the right amount of inventory of the right items is, I believe, what sets the best operators apart from the others, and which allows the best operators to continue to grow or at least outperform even in a declining market.
You got me thinking now too, just back to that previous graph showing like the pre-rolls versus the flour and stuff like that, how that plays a factor as well in overall sales and basket, how much per basket size, where pre-rolls are often pretty cheap. Like most people in Michigan that are buying pre-rolls, they're paying like $1 or two per pre-roll. Whereas if you're getting a gram of concentrate, maybe 10, 15, $20 in comparison, right? So just the way that some of this data and the trends are evolving really does help paint the picture of why things are the way they are.
Hmm. You got it.
And I'm just thinking like everyone gets their free pre-roll when they come to the dispensary for the first time, right? That's what they get. They're not getting the free dabs. They're not getting the 2 grams of flour, right? They're getting that free pre-roll.
That would be nice, though. I'd want to shop there whenever I'm getting
Yeah.
that deal. Free ounce for first time customer? Sign me up.
Come to Michigan, Ben. Come on to Michigan.
Dude, I'm not joking. I mean, I could literally I would go in with, my current wallet and I would walk out with 3 times as much weed as what I do here in Washington. It's pretty crazy.
And quality is a thing too, though, and you do still pay for quality. So, Michael was mentioning how many consumers will go in and get a pre-roll for $1 or two, but there are still, $6 or $8 or $10 pre-rolls that are available of higher quality flour, maybe a better experience. And the same applies to every category where we do see price compression, and you can get concentrates for less than $10 in some markets, or even better. They're still the top of the line, most quality rosin that is going to cost you at least 40, if not 60, or maybe $80 for a gram. So there's a lot of variability within each of these categories where not every unit is equal to one another. And that's the same as the baskets and the consumer spend. You might have, there really an average consumer? Let's say that the average basket is $50. Well, is it really $50 on average, or do you have some people that are spending a couple $100 on average and many people that are spending $15 or $20 on average? And that kind of all comes together, and that's where, it's really important as an operator to peel back these layers and see, well, what's making up all of this data. And the high level overview is easier to digest, but once you've digested that, we can start to process some of that into some more advanced consumer insights that are important when you're really trying to identify and target a specific customer, or understand different customer segments and how to speak to each of them and provide them the products and experience that they're seeking.
I just like to go back to, Missouri as an example where the experience that you're going to have on that Kentucky border is going to be different than the experience that you're going to have of an average customer in the middle of the state, right? It's just going to be different. I just know that in most cases, like you want to go where there's more sales, right? And you just see in a lot of these areas where operators understand that and they go to those places as well. And that's what's getting busier and busier and driving some of these places to just get really crazy.
Yeah, some of that is, there's operators' desire to enter certain markets or within a market, but there's still regs that only, depending on the market, the municipality may allow, states may allow for a certain amount of licenses that can control or influence supply and demand economics. And then within a given region, there might be so many municipalities that have opted in and have provided the opportunity for businesses to be active. Some of those are capped at a certain number, and it's not just impactful for the consumer within that specific geographic region or city, but the adjacent ones, and the impact of having, okay, maybe you have a smaller city, but there's only 3 dispensaries allowed there, but you can't, all of the neighboring municipalities for the next 20 or 30 miles, none of them have that product even available for sale. So you almost have to think about, and total addressable market is an interesting one, and we could talk about that forever. But how many people are there available and interested or open to purchasing product? And then out of those, your total addressable market really only is who you've identified within that you would like to address, whether you're a brand or a retailer.
And I think a lot of those people that don't think about that, they're not lasting very long, right? They're already in and out. And in some of these more mature markets, there's very little of that. Whereas in these emerging markets, there's more and more of that. People are very excited. They have this money to come in. And at least in 2025, there's a lot of talk about how there's no investments are completely dried up. But in new markets, there's always going to be people that want to get in and try and expand. That's just how it is. And they don't really know what they're doing a lot of the time. So that's why I'm glad we have this kind of data to give some better ideas.
Yeah, as an operator or as an owner, there's a densification strategy that one can apply to bigger markets where you may want to have multiple locations if there's the population there, and how much marketing efforts and dollars do you put into winning those markets versus how many may be needed in a smaller market where you're the only guy there. Still very important to stay in front and fresh in the eyes of the consumer, but it becomes dependent. Imagine an unlimited license or an 80 license limit in a given regular size city, or a 35, I should say, in a regular size city, and unlimited in any city. Then it becomes a real estate play at that point as much as anything for your your availability for a customer to have that ease and that convenience of purchasing. And then the other part that we haven't hit on, and we'll have plenty of other episodes to get into it, is the role of brick and mortar versus e-commerce, whether that's buy online, pick up in store, or delivery, or shoppers that have pre-shopped on the internet but then come and make their final purchase once they've gotten in the store. So consumer behavior and their shopping habits is something that I would love to explore in a future segment or episode with you guys.
Yeah.
We're very, very thankful for you joining us, and we'd love to continue on a regular cadence with some industry, market, category, purchase behavior, demographic updates. It's really incredible to see what data is out there and what we can learn from that. We did talk a little bit about the upcoming Green Wednesday, Black Friday. We've got, some big days coming up. Thanksgiving Day, oftentimes retailers are closed, so that overall week you may just be sucking some of that demand into the day before and the day after. The week does have I believe generally a slight bump up, followed by a little bit of regression in the following week. And then in December, from my experience, has generally been a ramp up and all the way through up until Christmas, with maybe a few days blip and then a big bang again around New Year's before we get into a January kind of reset, if you will, in the slower months of January, February, before we start to uptick again from a seasonality standpoint. Is that what you see, what you've seen as an operator, Michael, and what the data tells on a macro level as well?
I think that's a good summary. Going into December, it feels like a lot of times there's just some heavy, heavy discounts. I look back to how I got started at the job where I'm at. I brought my resume every single day because I was getting free products. I would just go there and get free weed, and then I'd drop off my resume. Like, it was the dream. It was the literal dream. And they still do that. right? Like that's still happening. Years later, even while we're looking at Michigan at those prices going down and it getting more and more cutthroat, because that's what they see it takes to keep those consumers going to your store rather than another store, right? They want you to make those purchases there. They'll give you the $2 pre-roll so that you buy the $10 flour. It's sad I have to say 10, not 30, right? But that's the reality of where we're at. And yeah, it's to your point, going then into the new year, it's a whole new year, whole new start, back to square one. But it really does feel like towards the end of the year, you're just clawing and trying to get the last little bit that you can before you reset.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there about making sure to capture the demand and with the offers, the deals. I think that one thing that we need to keep in mind as operators are revenue is part of the picture, but margin is a bigger part of the picture. And if
Absolutely.
you're running revenue, strong revenue, but at a 30% margin, well, guess what? You still have taxes to pay, which, is up higher than 30% in some markets like Washington. Michigan, we've been at about a 16. I think that there's been talks of going to the 24, which might be, stuck right now. But some of these markets, you've got taxes to pay, and then you've got to layer on top of that your operational expenses, and then what does your P&L really look like? And that doesn't even include your capital expenditures to get the business started, but just from an operational standpoint, how profitable can you really be? So you can work to be the biggest, highest sales, but you're also the biggest loser if you're not managing it against a P&L appropriately.
Yeah, I think my colleague Steph made this remark on the last time she was on this very podcast, is that revenue is probably one of the most misunderstood figures in cannabis business in general. It's all about the bottom line and what your margins, because a $1 pre-roll, it's the same $1 revenue, but if you're making 30% profit versus 60% profit, now all of a sudden that's a very, very different figure that we're talking about now. So that's really, I think you put it best, that the bottom line is really what matters, not the revenue. It's only part of the picture.
Inventory productivity is another one, turnover, how fast can you turn your inventory, but how good can you keep products in stock? Providing a customer experience, whether that be through value pricing or through some sort of qualifiable in-store experience to create what may be either a culture or a connection with the consumer. These are when some of the softer metrics come into play that can't be as easily quantified. It's really important to have all of that together, which is what's exciting about still being what seems like I've been in an industry for a long time, but it's still very much so emerging, and we're just at the beginning of what it will be in the next 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. We're going to be in a very different place. Incredible insights and data, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
You got it.
Before we wrap, would love to get any closing thoughts from you guys.
But yeah, at Headset, I work with cannabis operators to help them get a better scope on how well their products are doing across the market. Our retailer platform, I primarily work with the retailer side of things and helping them get onboarded with our free platform. There's no charge to integrate with our tool. We work with we partner with over 30 POS providers, so more than likely your store will probably likely be able to get connected to headsets. Yeah, I always recommend, regardless if it's headset or not, pay attention to the data, look at the numbers. That's where the money is being made and lost. But ultimately, the retailer platform, there's no charge for legally operating dispensaries to get connected to it. If you're a wholesale operator and you're sick and tired of hitting up, the dispensary purchasing managers every single week and asking them what their inventory is looking like, just get connected on headset and have that visibility at hand, so you're not going through that back and forth all the time. But I'm always active on LinkedIn or email. You can always reach me then. We can plug that when we post this later on. But yeah, I'm always here to help out the operators wherever I can. Yeah.
Geez, these service providers here are giving away something slightly better than a free pre-roll. It's a lot of
Dude,
free
oh my
pre-roll.
gosh. Yeah, there's a lot of value within a free tool like this. It's not just a free pre-roll. Like this is the sanctity and like the good standing of your business. Like this could really, really this could really change your outlook if you really are willing to kind of give it a chance. So yeah, it's always good to look at the numbers and have fun with it, because that's, like I said, it's where the money's being made and lost, is by looking at those.
Well, I'll just reinforce what Ben was just saying as far as I really do value what I've learned from Headset. Like I said before, I talked about that pre-roll study that I was looking at. There's just a lot of good stuff for everyone, even if you're just a consumer wanting to learn more about brands, right? It really is that easy. I mean, obviously, we are people that like data, that we're here talking about it on a day like today. But for everyone, I just can't recommend it enough. You're going to learn something, and why not? Right? Why not?
All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much. We look forward to having you on again. Hopefully we can make it a regular occurring segment where maybe we have a monthly check-in and maybe we switch up the themes or the focus. But I know that Michael and I both greatly appreciate what you've prepared and are willing to share with not just us, but with any of our listeners and anybody within our network. So thank you so much. And with that, I think we can sign off for this show. We've got our, another guest that's saying, "Hey, Ben, I need some attention and love too. Get off of that data." so we'll wrap. And, if we don't get together again until after Thanksgiving, you guys have a happy Thanksgiving, and looking forward to eating some good data for dessert maybe. So thank you guys. Yeah. Yes. And with that, we can do our official sign off. Michael, if you remember how that one goes.
Yeah, I don't remember if I'm first or second.
I think you're
okay.
First.
So from the weeds
to the clouds.
There we go. Peace.